I heard you missed us. We're back. And here we are once again with another edition of the King's Roundtable. Matt Hewitt and Steve Mutsu with Turnbuckle Bros here with our longtime close personal friends of the show, David Avens and Tyler Enzer. Welcome to the show, everybody. Crickets. Nice.
Thanks for the welcome, Matt.
All right. So what we're going to do today is that we solicited some questions from the message board on Diamond Mind Online, ImagineSports.com. Of course, what we talk about is always on the Roundtable, and we're going to address them. So Tyler was kind enough to make a post on the board asking, what do people want us to talk about? Well, what kind of advice do they want? What do they want us to discuss? What do they want us to argue about? And so there's a few questions that posted on there, and we're going to talk about all of them. So let's just dive right into it. The first question was, I'm actually looking right at the board here, and it's coming from our boy Tons Maniac. So shout out to Tons. Thanks for interacting.
Chris Tonzilla.
Tonzilla. Yeah, that's right. I should have said Tonzilla. Tons Maniac, Tonzilla, you the man. And so he says, you guys might have covered this before, but a good one to talk about would be the difference between stars and scrubs approach. So the difference between a stars and scrubs approach to a balanced approach to a roster build. Which one is better? Which one do we prefer? Besides the obvious, what new players can you look for to succeed at both? So I'm going to leave it to, let's just start it off with David, an experienced player of the game, and get this conversation going here. Stars and scrubs approach to as opposed to a balanced approach. David, what's your take on that?
The last few pricing cycles, I've been moving, more towards stars and scrubs. But my scrubs aren't total scrubs. They're guys who cost like $2 million and change. You want to go back 5 or 6 years, the prices were different, and like almost all of my players were between 6 and 9 million. So my approach is to be flexible and see where the values are.
Steve, what's your take on this?
I think the stars, having all like the stars and the scrubs, is easier to upgrade and work with and adjust as the season's going on. So I prefer that myself.
Tyler, you're about to chime in before I cut you off.
No, that's all right.
Sorry about that.
I was just going to ask, you find stars and scrubs good this cycle? Because I don't find many of the stars to be great values this cycle.
I thought Barry Bonds was an absolute fantastic value, and I think Eddie Collins is almost as good. I think there were a few others. And for pitching, I've got 3 pitchers on my current team who are all up around 9 million or something like that, which is as much as I spend on pitching usually.
Okay, yeah.
Plus an expensive closer.
Isn't it like every cycle somebody's a bargain, somebody's not? But with that build, with that roster construction, you can upgrade better. You know what I mean? It's a lot easier.
You always want to have a couple of players who are down like around 2 million or whatever. Yeah. But the question, I started out the season, I think, having 7 players in my batting order that cheap. And that's the first time I've done that in a very long time.
My ladder league team is the one where I completely followed my formulas and didn't try to do anything to make it interesting. I just tried to put my absolute best team on the field based on my spreadsheets. And that one, I ended up spending about $50 million on pitching and $50 million on offense. So
this is definitely a heavy pitching cycle.
Yeah. But I agree too about Barry Bonds. For me, when I look at the high-end players, I think the 4 that really show up as decent values are Bonds, Babe Ruth, Gehrig, and Wagner. But they're not as good as last cycle. Last cycle, there were a couple of just like amazing values in the high price range, and I find that that's not quite the same this time.
Very nice. So moving right along, here's one we didn't plan to talk about. So there's this ham and egger, this jabroni, this curtain jerker named the Lime Ripper, who posted on this. And he said, why is the one guy with the tattoos so much better looking than the rest? Based off our offline conversation, Tyler, I think we're talking about you, being as we just found out you had 4 tattoos. Tyler, how do you look so good all the time, brother?
Yeah, he was definitely talking about me, right?
I was talking.
And then he actually said, then this suggestion, I know you guys know this guy better than I do. RCRNY, he's
Rick.
Rick's a repeat offender on the board. Shout out to Rick, man. Thanks for always chiming in on our stuff. And he said, this suggestion coming from who it does, Steve, brings up a fantastic subject. Is the guy with the Duck Dynasty beard mentally fit? And so Steve says, yeah, I am concerned about Matt as well. But as everybody can see, I have a brand new, very closely trimmed beard for the first time in several years. And I might say,
you have not looked worse since I took you to get your hair cut when you were like 11.
Should we tell that story real quick?
Hey, you can if you want.
All right. I'm going into 6th grade. I'll never forget this. Summer of 1993.
Everything always happens in 93 with this.
I know.
You guys notice that?
Well, I'm telling you, if you go back, this was it, because I've got the yearbooks and pictures to prove it. All right? My first day of school is the next day. Summertime, right? Mom leaves for work, and she says, Steve, Matt needs his haircut. They're doing pictures at school at the first day of school tomorrow. Matt needs a haircut for his school pictures. Take him to get his haircut today. He says, all right. And so, of course, he waits to the last minute, and there's a haircut in place just right up the street from our house. So what does he do? He takes me to the haircut in place, and he's like, all right, Matt, I'll be back here to pick you up. And I'll be back here to pick you up in a little bit. I got this girl waiting for me, about to go to her house real quick. Banger. I'm like, all right. So he leaves me there. I'm 11 years old. I walk into this haircutting place, and I'm sitting there. I'm waiting for my turn for a little bit, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm here by myself. I can get any haircut I want. Oh, I was like, oh, Steve's ass is grass. I'm sitting there. I sit in the barber's chair, and I start thinking, what is the craziest haircut I could get right now? And I'm thinking about all these, crazy hairstyles. And there was a classic tag team from the 80s and 90s called the Nasty Boys. Brian Knobs and Jerry Sags. All right, the Nasty Boys. They wrestled for a long time. And they have the worst skullets ever created. They had mohawks. The sides of their heads were shaved, and they had super long hair in the back. Well, at the time, I had long hair almost my whole life. From the time I was a little kid till I was about 25, I had hair, way down here for a long time. So I go in there, and I made that barber shave the sides of my head completely off with a mohawk with a big, long hair in the back, and it looked horrible. Steve comes to pick me up and sees this, and he's like, oh, shit. Oh, my God. You fucking retard. Like, why would you do this? And he goes, well, we're already in deep shit. Let's make it worse. Let's go buy some black hair dye and dye it jet black. We go buy a can of black hair spray, sprays it, dyes it jet black, and we just went home and sat in the kitchen and waited for our mom to get home. We're just sitting there. She walks in. It takes her about 5 minutes to even notice. And then she finally notices, oh my God! So I got my school pictures looking like Jerry Sags of the Nasty Boys. The worst skullet of all time.
So now that you're
Mom.
Now that you're older and some of your friends are parents, even if you're not, you think she noticed before those 5 minutes?
No, she didn't.
I don't think so.
If you knew our mom, you would know. She didn't notice. Anyways, moving right along. Story time's over.
It was a horrible haircut. It was like a super wide mohawk.
Yeah.
It was like Mr. T's mohawk, but like 3 of them across. It was really wide.
It was like the mohawk was the whole top of your head. All the sides were totally shaved. I had him lift up the long hair in the back, shaved it all the way around. It was really, it was atrocious. It was really bad, but it was hilarious. And I got my school pictures taken like that. Anyways, Let's go to Bill_Houston on the board. And he brings up a good one here. We've talked a little bit about this in shows in the past. He said, I would like a discussion of what people use for their team instructions. All of us have talked about this before. Let's dive back into it now. Steve, you kind of got something that you typically do all the time with your team instructions. Tell us a little bit about that.
Let's see. Like I set run to like 5. Man, you hit me on the spot. I need to look at it. I don't know what. Somebody else say something. I'll chime in.
Yeah, I was going to look at mine, but okay. Thing is, I could do this, say without looking. Run is always 3.
4 or 5 for me.
I might change. Thing is, if I were playing in a good offensive environment, I'd probably go 4. But I think I play in a bad offensive environment, so I go 3. For the most part, I think the sim knows when to take risks, trying to take an extra base.
Swing at 3-0 pitches, never.
I put that to 1.
You put that at 1?
Yeah.
I'll punch my computer screen if they swing at 3-0.
I want them swinging at 3-0. If it's a good hitter, like Babe Ruth should always have the green light on 3-0. Barry Bonds, any home run hitter should always have the green light.
Why?
Depends on how often you think they'll.
No way. It should always be never.
It's they don't swing at all of them anyway, and it's the best pitch they're going to get in an at bat.
A walk is
maybe
always
in real life
good,
it's the best pitch they're going to get in the bat, but it's just another pitch in this game,
No, I think this game does take count into account when it determines the outcome of the plate
So you think
appearance.
they're grooving 3-0?
Yes.
They are not.
I don't think the sim takes count into account for the pitch. I do think it takes count into account for whether the batter should swing, even aside from 3-0. But 3-0, it could be really extreme.
But do you think that 3-1 is more like if they put the ball in play on 3-1, that's more likely to go for hit than on 0-2, right?
I doubt it.
I think it's the same as like a dice roll. Every time you pick it up and roll it, it's just a new thing, and then it doesn't matter what happened last time. It's just another one.
I'm with Steve on the taking at 3-0 and every time. And something that popped in my head that I kind of like about it is that it's gonna help you bring up that pitch count just a little bit more.
That's right.
That pitcher's gonna throw a lot of extra pitches that he normally wouldn't. So maybe he has to throw 3 more straight pitches and he strikes out. Maybe he throws 1 or 2 extra. But if you're taking on 3-0 every time, 3-0 counts come up a lot.
They do.
So you might get to a bullpen that much faster, and it might make the difference in a game. That's what I like about it.
Even at 1 on swing at 3-0, they rarely do it.
Strategy be damned.
Right.
I can't look at
Which
it.
is the whole thing. It doesn't make all that much difference what you choose here. But in general, a walk is as good as a hit is an exaggeration, but a walk is still pretty good.
It's pretty good, yeah.
I want the opposing pitcher to throw pitches, and I want to get my runners on base.
What about the bunt settings? Never and never for me.
Except
if you're not at least VG, the team setting is never. Individuals, I'll override, especially for suicide squeeze.
I do that
on that, my team setting might even be 3. But again, I'll override. If you don't have average, you're not even doing a suicide squeeze. If you don't have very good, you are never bunting for a hit or for sacrifice. And you're very rare. I mean, anybody who's got a decent ISO, the slugging percentage minus batting average, they're probably. Or I'm sorry, this is just OPS. I very rarely want them bunting. If you're Eddie Collins, maybe I'll set you for 5 instead of never. But basically, if you're a decent hitter, you shouldn't be sacrificing.
And I think too,
when you're my backup shortstop and you're a VG bunter, then yeah, you could sacrifice.
In watching the PvP, some people I think don't watch the play-by-play, and if you never watch the play-by-play, you might not recognize what you're doing to your team if you don't go really conservative on bunting. Because I've seen excellent hitters bunt. I've seen Barry Larkin will try to bunt in the first inning. Or like I've even seen guys, and I look them up, and they have like they're poor at bunting, and I don't know what my opponent's settings are at, but it strikes me that the computer is, I mean, the sim manager is not built to bunt in the optimal setting. It's built to bunt in the way that a manager from the 50s or 60s would have bunted. And
which is way too much.
Right, it's way too much, and it's with way too good hitters. So I think people do need to be cautious with how they set it, especially if they're not watching their team to see how often it happens.
What are some other settings we might be missing?
Stealing.
Guard the lines.
Stealing is set to never for me because I'm never running into an out, ever.
Well,
After the work that Hoover did, I'm stealing more than I used to, and I was never.
I said it that way. And then me and Steve play games and watch games live against each other, and I was running all the time.
You had to have that on. That had to be a 3 or something.
So,
I think it was an accident.
I've always used it at never, but I don't know how to. Bod was saying in a recent discussion board post, and I don't know what the answer to this is. So he's always pointed out that double plays, stealing avoids double plays, which is true.
Yes. So does hit and run.
It also causes double plays too.
It's
like he
not
doesn't
as
think
often,
about that,
because
but
line drives are less common than ground balls, right?
But what about strike them out, throw them out?
Those happen. So the question is, at what rate do you need to successfully steal in order for it to offset the risk of hitting into a double plays and to, maximize? You are taking a risk that you'll be thrown out, obviously.
I think that's where the player instructions settings.
Right, you would want to do it by
player.
But what is that point? Does anyone know? Like,
somewhere around 2/3.
We've got so X jump, X steal should probably be set. I don't know. I'd probably put them at 3, I guess.
That one catcher throwing thread, it looked like people were in 2 camps on that. Like some people think in a lower run scoring environment, you should be more worried about stealing, and so
if you don't have a way to drive your your runners home, it's not so much lower run scoring, but lower home runs, doubles, triples. If you don't have a way to drive your runners home, then it's worth taking more risks on the bases to get them home.
Right. That seems almost definitely it seems just obviously true, because if you try to picture a situation where no one can do anything but get a single, if you're never going to steal, you're going to need at least 3 hits every inning to score even just 1 run.
That's the way to look at it. Bod, what do you think about what you chimed in? Oh, yeah, that's right. You didn't show up again or even say anything. Bod.
He messaged Tyler, I thought.
Because Flaxen, FLAXM, came on here and he said, I want to hear a Ripper and Bod debate on anything, but we can't because Bod doesn't show up to the roundtable anymore.
I will argue with him about anything. Turtles, guitar playing, curtains, I don't care, whatever he wants.
Maybe it'll turn out you agree on turtles.
We will not.
All right.
I will take the reverse position no matter what. Whatever it is, I'm going to
turtles all the way down.
Yeah.
I'll either
who was the greatest Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle? That's a debate I want to have with Bob.
Oh, all the good ones in to know, and Donatello's the best one.
Raphael's the only one that doesn't end in O.
Yeah, fuck him. Only the ones that end in O. All the
good ones
end in O.
Raphael's my dude.
David, what were you going to say about guarding the lines, by the way?
Oh, in general, I think you want to play more for your own on-base percentage and against your opponent's on-base percentage than the sim defaults. So I would guard the lines less than the sim says. On the other hand, I play in poor offensive environments, so I may well set it on 3 and go with the sim defaults. But if the sim were sensible to begin with, it would be doing it less, and then I'd be putting it in 2 because of my offensive environment. But
do we know
the sim plays for 1 run and against 1 run more than you want?
Right. I always get nervous when they throw to the plate on a ground ball in the infield. A lot of times the guy's safe, and then you turn a double play into runners at first and second and a run's in.
God, I
I'll
love
leave
it
that
when
one
that
at 3
happens.
because I don't know what's going on with any
Well,
of
I
that.
love it when it happens to when my team's batting. I hate when
Yeah.
it happens when I'm on defense.
All right.
Um,
Let's move on to the next topic here. And it's from our boy Deadpool. And Deadpool says he wants to throw up or out a topic. Nice little pun there, Deadpool. So he says in SSG, when is the opportune time to cash in a player for an upgraded version or for someone different if there aren't any better upgrade options? He says, is it after a specific week in the year? Maybe, when cash payments come out, after a specific player usage, like at a certain time where their plate appearances or innings are about to get used up, or after a specific dollar amount in the bank. So there's a lot of different philosophies and strategies and different kinds of things you can say on this one. And I chimed in already on the post my opinion on it. But Steve, you're an SSG guru. What do you think about this?
Man, that really all
here?
depends. But recently I had a shortstop. I think he had like 700 plate appearances or something crazy like that. There was no way I was keeping this guy. He's not good enough to be on my team, but I didn't have a choice at the time. And I just rode with him until it got to the point where I could sign the guy I needed who had like 300 plate appearances. And then I knew I could just let him go for the rest of the year. So that's when I made that move. When the guy I wanted, I can't forget who it was, but when the guy I wanted could play every day the rest of the year, that's when I made that move.
That's the key, that 300 plate appearances. In a large pool, if you can finish the season where all your batters have 300 to 350 real-life plate appearances, that means they'll be good for a playoffs. That means you're not paying for in the regular season. They'll be better than somebody for the same salary who was a full-time player all year.
Yes, that is one of the big keys right there. I kind of do that with all my upgrades in SSG. Something similar, something like that.
And our good friend of the show and from Imagine Sports, Charles Wolfson, chimed in on that post, and he said exactly that. And he said at the point where his replacement has just enough plate appearances or innings pitched to get you through the rest of the season, thereby maximizing the cash back on the version or buy being released and minimizing unused plate appearances and innings pitched that you've paid for already. So that's pretty much exactly that's perfect way. Charles is a super smart guy. That's a way smarter way of explaining it, obviously. So
a way better way to say it, yeah. But yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of different things you could do there. Sometimes that's not always going to work out for you. All right, so sometimes you're probably going to burn plate appearances, but you have to make a move. Maybe your starting roster was super heavy on your salary cap. You didn't have much in the bank. You got stuck with a $500K, $1 million player that you got to get rid of quick, but you got to wait to that first cash payout of $2 million or whatever it's going to be in your league to make a move. Sometimes there's risky moves like that you might have to do. So it's not always going to work out that way.
Sometimes you start off with that 350 plate appearance guy and you got to finesse him through the season and fill in with like an 80 plate appearance guy here, burn him up, get another one. The 70 plate appearance guy, burn him up until you at the end of the year with the guy you want. Yeah. You can do it that way too. Sometimes that's the way it ends up.
Yep. All right.
And you also got to have some of the guys that you just keep all year just because, you don't have enough money and roster space to just keep churning around like that all with everybody.
Platooning situations. You'll come across those a lot, and leagues like me and Steve play in. Progression leagues, the SSG. There's a lot of platooning that goes on there with 350 plate appearances guys. You might have two of them that you're just kind of, maybe maybe one's great against right-handers, maybe one's great against left-handers, and you kind of spread those guys out, or maybe one's a defensive replacement for the other. Or there's all kinds of different things you can do there. David, are you ready to talk about spreadsheets? Because Pass Ball, friend of the show, came on and said, how about spreadsheet formulas? And I think David is ready to talk about that because David is a brilliant spreadsheet type of guy. So you want me to let's just go ahead and bring up David's screen here. He's got a spreadsheet ready for us.
Okay. So you start at, let's see. There we go. No, it's not. I'm going to have to switch away to get this. There we go. So if I click here, yes, you see the change. Okay. So you start out by doing the basic download, at least what of all the, what I do is I download all the numeric stats. By that, I mean all the counting stats. I don't worry about anything that IS computes. No RC, no nothing else. I'm gonna compute my own. If you like what IS does, you could save a few steps. And then, here, let me blow this up. Does that still look good on your screen?
It looked better with the way you had it before.
All right. I can't see as much, but okay.
Yeah.
So, based on all these, it doesn't take as many downloads as it does, but you can, you download as it used to. You download one, it saves it in a file. You save it as Excel. Don't leave it in a CSV format. Yeah. And then you go and get the next batch of stats, and you paste it in right next to it. Now, the way IS has it, you always end up with their names is messed up, and I have to recompute the names, and everything's offset by one, and you always need to do something like here and go insert and shift everything to the right so that the column headers line up with the stats because of the way that IS downloads.
SimSanta 22, Dane.
What's that?
SimSanta 2022, Dane.
Oh, yeah, right. Because they've got the first name, the last name, whether their bat or pitcher hand, and an SSG, the year, all kind of mashed together, and Excel doesn't quite recognize how they're mashed, so you need to undo that yourself. And if anybody wants, they can ask me on a message board, but explaining those formulas to make that a little faster is probably more detailed than we want. So once we've got all of the ratings and all of the counting stats downloaded, see, I guess I should unhide everything here. So Control A to select all, and then select, go to a column header, unhide. So during the season, you don't really need a lot of these. Once stuff is computed from them, you don't need them. Okay, I got all the ratings here, the injuries, all the versus lefties and righties. Those are about the only computed stats that you have to get from IS if you want. You can't compute them yourself because it doesn't give you the hits versus lefties, the at-bats versus lefties. All right. And then the fielding ratings, which here, this probably is worth talking about. There's except I erased the columns with the original ones. So if anybody wants here, I'll go all the way down to the bottom, and I'll just write something here. So if I have something that says AV/85, and I want to get that 85, equals value. That's the key part that a lot of people don't know. And then mid of this, starting with whatever. So, mid of this. Come on. Oh, because the equals isn't there. Okay. Equals. Now it's a formula. Equals value of mid of this cell. Okay. So that is A2874. A2874.
You forgot the 8.
Thank you. 2874. Starting with the fourth character and whatever, 9, because it's always going to be 2 or 3, but you could put in too many there. and you close the two. All right. Oh, that equals keeps not showing up. Is there something wrong with my keyboard? That's why the clicking on the cell wasn't working. There we go. Okay. All right. So now you actually have 85 as a number. If you don't include that value, then you don't have the 85 as a number. You have 85 and Excel thinks it's text and you can't do any math with it. So that's something that you got to look up. There must be a way to do this, or you just learned how to do it.
It definitely helps to be versed in Excel, which a lot of people aren't. But
right.
Nowadays, being versed in Excel is going to probably help you in a lot of different aspects in life, especially in the workforce and stuff. I've had to learn it, and I still don't know how to use it. But learning Excel formulas is going to definitely, obviously, help with this process. Just want to throw that out there.
All right. So then for each position, I figure out how much I value their defense. If anybody is really that interested and they want to pause the video right here, they could see this is a formula which I could explain if somebody asks on the message board, that refers back to the catcher field to the first base fielding columns, and tells me how much I think Jimmy Ward, I don't have my glasses on, Jimmy Wasdell is worth defensively compared to an average 100 first baseman. I usually do this with my reading glasses on. All right, and I do this for every position, and so I got the defensive value, and then, let's not go into how I compute how good somebody is versus lefties versus righties. It's a combination of how good their offense is altogether with adjustments for those versus lefty and righty things. And then here's the key part I wanted to show. In addition to all this data here that I've got for pitchers, for catchers, you make a configuration tab that I call lookups. And among other things here, and I've got all this named here. So suppose I go constants, that highlights this. So anytime I do a VLOOKUP to constants, comma A over C, it'll return this 0.325. So that's telling me I think overall the on-base percentage equivalent in my runs created formula for this environment is 325. And I got all these things that I can refer to in my formulas. Among the most important is what is my replacement value for at each position compared to a league average hitter with an average 100 position at that, with an average 100 fielding at that position. Now, this is like, what's the best I could get at that for $500,000? I'm not saying it's necessarily best to use $500,000 for the replacement value, especially for pitchers. I've gone back and forth between using $500K and $1 million, but it's simpler when I just use $500,000 for every position. And it doesn't matter much because you're going to compare one player at a position to another player at a position. And I'm saying for $500K, I could get about a -70 player, and they're all going to be compared. If I'm comparing Ted Simmons to Josh Gibson, they're both going to be compared to the -70. So it basically washes out.
Right. You could legitimately use any arbitrary number as long as it's the same for everyone, right?
Pretty much. There are some subtle differences they're not worth worrying about.
Right.
Okay, so this gives me how much I would get essentially for free, because you have to spend $500,000 on a player anyway. And that means I can then talk about value. One of these lookup things is RPM, runs per million. Now, I'm using a special thing where I'm double counting runs. I'm counting run estimate based on the current salary versus the reset salary, and I'm also using it based on the downloaded sim stats and my formulas from there versus say that -70 for catchers. So I'm not saying you can really get 4.5 runs per million, but by my system, which is kind of double counting runs, I'm saying I can get 4.5 per million. And so then we go back here and we look at the values for each position. The ones with the tilde are the ones that include the reset values. So I'm saying here that I could spend that if I spend my money on Jimmy Wasdell to be a first baseman, I'm actually giving up 6.3 runs. It's negative 6.3 compared to just getting the best 500,000 I could, which is not too surprising. He's 500,000. The best 500,000 is better than him. But what happens if we sort based on that tilde V1B? And there we get...
Is that essentially sorting by value?
Yep. For first baseman. This is for somebody to be my if it's going to take a moment. Okay. To be my full-time first baseman.
My number one is Mark Grace. Is yours different, probably?
Yes.
Or are you sharing that?
I have Mark Grace second. I have Norm Seaburn first.
Okay.
Hate the Cubs, love Mark Grace.
So
of every first baseman, you guys got Mark Grace as the best by.
I have. Yeah, Tyler has him best. I have second. Yeah. So you can see the top few values
right now
are about 30 runs better at 4.5 million per run than I could get at the best 500,000. He's a lot more than 30 runs better, but I have to account for all the money I'm spending, which I could spend elsewhere. And I'm saying in spite of that, he's about a 30 plus run value. Does that mean you still need to compare position by position? Because unless you want to really tailor all these replacement values by position, 30 is the best you're going to get at first base, but it might be piddling at shortstop. Maybe you could do 50 at shortstop. I don't even remember. But position by position, that's a way to compare value and find the player who will get you the most. If you take the best value at every position, at every role in your pitching staff, etc., and it comes out to be more than your salary cap, that means you've got to increase your RPM, your runs per million, so that you're saying money is worth more. I need to get more for my money, and then that'll make cheaper salary players more valuable. If you have money left over, then you increase your RPM. And for me to get to a 100 million team with an open pool in Classic with no special rules in this salary cycle, I needed 4.5.
I have to say that adjusting the runs per million is one of the most useful pieces of information.
So tell us how you really feel about it, Tyler.
Useful pieces of information that David provided, because before that I was just trying to do, like, a lot of people will say it's about 3 runs per million, but you then end up cycle to cycle. If you're just using a constant number of runs per million, sometimes it's going to give you where your top players at each position, their salary summed to like 95 million, and that's no good if you're playing in a $100 million cap.
Right.
So you really do have to adjust the runs per million according to the salary structure and to the cap that you're using.
Yep. And then I keep separate pages with all this same data just for the players actually on my team, my pitchers and my batters, that will help me choose who backups are, how to set a batting order, etc. And then a reference page with the order of my lineups, so that when one player gets injured and I fiddle with my lineup, I remember how I said it the first time. That's about all I had to say. If people want to hear more about this, I doubt that all that many of you want to hear more. If a lot of people want to do more, I could explain more on another podcast. Otherwise, I could answer some questions on the forum. That's
right on. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, David. And that's Gonna bring us to the end of the show today. So if you diamond miners out there want to keep asking questions, we could do Q&A style shows on here often. If you got stuff you want us to talk about, hear our thoughts about stuff, hear what we want to argue about. If Bod ever grows some balls and shows up back to the show again and wants to argue about something or whatnot, post it on the boards. We're all
we need to get a league going because, we're all talking all the time, but I'm ready to whoop some ass. I'm not, it's time to
week
whoop ass.
7 of my league.
It's time to put up or shut up. Let's go, Bod.
Let's go, Bod.
Me and Bod are in the same division. I say put DVD in there, too. Tyler, you can join. I don't mind. Let's go.
I'm ready for a jabroni like me to whoop all y'all. So I'm ready to go.
In a few weeks, maybe coming up on a month, I will be starting a league that you're all invited to.
Boom. Let's do this. I'm ready.
What about this live draft they were talking about? We just draft right here on the show.
You could do that too.
And we'll go with that team. That's the team you play with, the team you draft. Let's do it.
12 players on if for just 4 players, that would work. For a 12-player league, I don't think that would work.
Oh, yeah, that would take forever.
You know what? We could do a 4-player league. I never thought of that. That never occurred to me.
Well, if Bod's in, there's 5 of us.
Yeah. We got to be.
I don't know.
We have to beat up on Bod or it ain't no fun.
We can. I don't even know if there are 4
We're not beating up on Bod. What's the point?
All right. So, a lot of stuff in the works for us. Sorry we've missed you all for a while. Life happens sometimes. But for the guys, for David, for Tyler,
don't forget
for the Ripper, for Mr. T, for the bobbleheads behind Steve, for all of the starving children in the world, I would like to end the show today like this. So, what you gonna do when the Turnbuckle Bros run wild on you, brother?